But he said there wasn't any letter. He said I was going out of my mind.
Not going out of your mind. You're slowly and systematically being driven out of your mind.
Why? Why?
Hey comrades, welcome to the channel. I'm the Obnoxious Anarchist. I hope you're all having a safe quarantine. In today's video, I want to look at how capitalism gaslights the poor.
In a few years, people are going to be doing what they always do when the economy tanks. They would be blaming immigrants and poor people.
Firstly, since I hear the term gaslighting being used out of context so often, I want to clearly define what gaslighting means. Secondly, I'd like to highlight the difference between gaslighting on the interpersonal level and sociological gaslighting that manifests itself in social and structural contexts. Thirdly, I want to apply what we've spoken about and explain exactly how capitalism gaslights the poor. So let's jump into some dictionary definitions. Encyclopedia Britannica defines gaslighting as an elaborate and insidious technique of deception and psychological manipulation. Its effect is to gradually undermine the victim's confidence in their own ability to distinguish truth from falsehood. Wikipedia defines gaslighting as a form of psychological manipulation in which a person or a group covertly sows seeds of doubt in a targeted individual, making them question their own memory, perception, or judgment. And finally, Urban Dictionary defines gaslighting as an increasing frequency of systematically withholding factual information from and or providing false information to the victim, having the gradual effect of making them anxious, confused, and less able to trust their own memory and perception.
You've cast out fear for me.
Oh, Paula, if it were true, it would make me very happy.
It is true.
Now, the term gaslighting comes from the title of a late 1930s play and its 1940s film adaptation titled Gaslight. The film is about a newlywed couple, Paula and Gregory, who move into a London house that Paula inherited from her aunt who was killed. Not long after, Gregory begins to gaslight Paula. Slowly, he starts manipulating her to believe she's going insane, and he forbids her from leaving the house without him. In one scene, Paula finds a letter in her aunt's house that could give clues as to who murdered her.
Here's an old letter. It was written 2 days before she was murdered.
Where did you find that?
It was written by somebody called Sergius Bauer.
Give it to me.
Gregory rips the letter from her hand, and when Paula, at a later time in the movie, brings up the letter, Gregory swears that there was no letter in her hand at all, and that she's going crazy.
The first day here when I found that letter,
What letter?
the one I found among the music from that man called Bauer.
I can see you still, standing there and saying, look at this letter, and staring at nothing.
You had nothing in your hand.
What?
He is, of course, trying to hide this letter from her because it proves that he's actually the person who murdered her aunt.
If I could only get inside that brain of yours and understand what makes you do these crazy, twisted things.
The movie Gaslight focuses on gaslighting within the intimate interpersonal relationship between Paula and Gregory, and gaslighting is usually understood in psychology as a covert abuse tactic used by narcissists to abuse their victims in the context of an intimate relationship. But gaslighting can also be understood socially and structurally. Even the abuse taking place in gaslight can be understood as macro gender inequalities manifesting in micro interpersonal contexts. The abuse is dependent upon women being seen as hysterical, overly emotional, or crazy. Gregory uses these societal stereotypes of women to reinforce his abuse against Paula. This is not to say that men never experience abuse or abusive tactics, but rather that gender inequality makes women more likely to be victimized than men. In their article, The Sociology of Gaslighting, Dr. Paige Sweet argues that gaslighting is fundamentally a social phenomenon, and that unlike psychological approaches to gaslighting, a sociological theory of gaslighting must show how macro-level social inequalities are transformed into micro-level strategies of abuse. Dr. Paige Sweet argues that gaslighting tactics become consequential when abusers mobilize macro-level inequalities related to gender, sexuality, race, nationality, and class against an intimate other. Gaslighting offers an opportunity for sociologists to theorize under-recognized gender forms of power and their mobilization in interpersonal relationships. Intersectional scholarship reveals that racial discrimination, immigration policy, and poverty shape the dynamics of abuse and its effects. Not every woman is equally likely to be abused. Rather, intersecting inequalities make women of color, poor women, immigrant women, and disabled women even more vulnerable to abuse. Race, class, and immigrant status are critical for understanding the intersectional context in which abuse differentially shapes victims. Some more concrete examples of structural gaslighting include medical gaslighting and racial gaslighting. In their article, Cultural Gaslighting, Elena Ruiz describes medical gaslighting as the interpersonal phenomenon of having one's experience of illness marginalized, downplayed, silenced, or psychologically manipulated, which can then have significant intergenerational, intragenerational, and historic group consequences that not all social groups face. Elena Ruiz speaks specifically of the marginalization of Black and Indigenous women's health in the US, and writes that social and biomedical technologies in settler colonial societies are deeply embedded in power differentials that functionalize colonial relations. In their article, White Feminist Gaslighting, Nora Bernstein writes that the practice of normalizing white supremacy by pathologizing resistance to it is in fact a form of structural gaslighting. In this case, it's racial gaslighting. And that makes a lot of sense. White supremacy really does gaslight the resistance to it, even so far as to deny its own existence. So how exactly does capitalism gaslight the poor?
Generally speaking, Americans tend to associate poverty with personal failure, and this belief directly affects how we address poverty in society.
Similar to racial gaslighting, where resistance to white supremacy is pathologized, in financial gaslighting, resistance to capitalism is pathologized, and the poor are blamed for their own poverty. And of course, when we're talking about European colonial capitalism, we can't forget how race and class overlap. Whenever we, the working poor, point to legitimate problems with social inequality, we get told that it is in fact our own fault that we are poor. Not only that, but that we should be motivated by the possibility that we may be rich one day.
The combined wealth, this is according to Oxfam, of the world's 85 richest people is equal to the 3.5 billion poorest.
It's fantastic. And this is a great thing because it inspires everybody, gets the motivation to look up to the 1% and say, I want to become one of those people. I'm going to fight hard to get up to the top. This is fantastic news, and of course I applaud it. What can be wrong with this? Really? Yes, really. So somebody living on I celebrate capitalism.
We tend to fetishize the billionaire, and in that process, we internalize that same hatred that billionaires have for the poor. This manifests as social shaming of people on food stamps or other welfare programs. The problem is not people that use welfare benefits. The problem is that a class of people are being allowed and encouraged to keep destroying and depleting the environment. But in order to deflect responsibility from themselves, they convince us to fight amongst each other. The lazy leech is not the person who works a little bit slower than you do. The lazy leech is the person who steals the surplus value of both your labor so they can work less. The reality is that those who make the highest profits can wield the most political power and are responsible for our ecological collapse. They will gaslight us into believing that you and your neighbors are the real problem, and like any abusive relationship, ending is better than mending.
Look into my eyes. If I ever meant anything to you, and I believe I did, then help me, Paula. Give me another chance.
Escape. How can a mad woman help her husband to escape?
But you're not mad.
Yes, I am mad. But because I am mad, I hate you. Because I am mad, I have betrayed you. And because I am mad, I'm rejoicing in my heart without a shred of pity, without a shred of regret. Watching you go with glory in my heart.
I'm the Obnoxious Anarchist. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share if you haven't already. Happy quarantine, comrades.